You've probably spent more time fighting yourself than you'd care to admit. There's that voice in your head, the one that shows up every morning with a fresh list of everything wrong with you, your life, your choices. Sounds so reasonable, so helpful, as it points out your procrastination, your tendency to avoid difficult conversations, your habit of checking your phone when you should be working. We cannot change anything until we accept it. Carl Jung once wrote, "Condemnation does not liberate, it oppresses." But here you are, still wielding condemnation like a weapon against your own existence, convinced that if you just criticize yourself hard enough, transformation will magically follow. Consider how this plays out in your relationships. You have noticed that friend who always interrupts, haven't you? The one who turns every conversation back to themselves? Your inner critic springs into action immediately, cataloging their flaws, building a case for why they're selfish, rehearsing the speech you'll never give about their narcissistic tendencies. Meanwhile, the actual relationship deteriorates under the weight of your silent judgment. You're not present with them anymore. You're present with your condemnation of them. The very act of fighting their behavior has made you less capable of genuine connection. Your career frustrations follow the same pattern. That project that's been sitting on your desk for weeks, growing more intimidating by the day. You have turned it into a symbol of your inadequacy. Every time you avoid it, you layer on another coat of self-judgment. "I'm so lazy," you tell yourself. "I'm unprofessional. I'm letting everyone down." But notice what happens. The more you condemn your procrastination, the more paralyzed you become. The shame creates a feedback loop that makes the task feel even more impossible. Jung understood something profound about human psychology that your inner critic has never grasped. Resistance creates persistence. When you fight against something, whether it's your own behavior, someone else's personality, or life circumstances, you give it power. You feed it with your attention, your emotional energy, your mental resources. That annoying coworker becomes more annoying because you're constantly braced for their next irritating comment. Your anxiety grows stronger because you're always trying to push it away. But what if you tried something different? What if instead of greeting your procrastination with a familiar litany of self-abuse, you simply acknowledged it? Here I am, avoiding this project again. No editorializing, no character assassination, just recognition. It feels almost too simple, doesn't it? Your mind probably rebels against this approach. But if I don't criticize myself, how will I ever change? It protests. If I accept my flaws, won't I just become complacent? This is where Jung's insight becomes revolutionary. Acceptance isn't resignation. It's the foundation for genuine transformation. When you stop fighting your procrastination and simply observe it with curiosity, something shifts. You might notice that you tend to avoid tasks when you're hungry, or tired, or overwhelmed by too many competing priorities. You might discover that your procrastination is actually a signal. Your psyche's way of telling you that you need to break the project into smaller pieces, or that you're taking on work that doesn't align with your values. The same principle applies to your relationships. When you stop trying to mentally renovate that interrupting friend and simply accept that this is how they engage with the world, you create space for something new to emerge. Maybe you'll find yourself naturally setting boundaries, not from a place of anger or judgment, but from simple self-care. Maybe you'll discover that their interrupting behavior actually stems from anxiety, and your acceptance allows them to relax enough to become better listeners. Your body knows this truth already. When you have a headache, fighting it with tension and frustration only makes it worse. But when you breathe into the discomfort, when you accept its presence without adding the extra layer of resistance, it often begins to soften. The pain doesn't necessarily disappear, but your relationship transforms. You're no longer at war with your own experience. This is the paradox Jung identified. Condemnation creates the very conditions it claims to solve. When you condemn your anxiety, you become anxious about being anxious. When you judge your anger, you become angry at yourself for being angry. Each layer of resistance adds another barrier between you and the freedom you're seeking. But acceptance, true acceptance, cuts through all those layers at once. Let's get practical about this. Tomorrow morning, when your alarm goes off and you immediately start the mental gymnastics about how tired you are, how much you dread the day ahead, how you should have gone to bed earlier, pause. Instead of launching into your usual self-prosecution, try this. I notice I'm tired and feeling resistant to the day. Feel how different that is? You're not denying the tiredness or pretending to be enthusiastic. You're simply acknowledging what's present, without adding the commentary track of judgment. Your morning commute becomes a laboratory for this practice. That aggressive driver who cuts you off in traffic, your nervous system immediately floods with indignation. What an idiot springs to mind, followed by a detailed fantasy about their character defects and driving incompetence. But what if you caught yourself mid-judgment and shifted? I notice someone driving aggressively, and I notice my own anger rising. Suddenly you're not trapped in road rage. You're observing the whole dance of stimulus and reaction with some spaciousness. At work, your difficult colleague, let's call them Pat, provides daily opportunities to practice Jung's wisdom. Pat interrupts meetings, takes credit for others' ideas, and somehow always manages to deflect responsibility when projects go sideways. Your mind has built an entire case file against Pat, complete with evidence and character witnesses. But today, when Pat launches into another monologue about their brilliant insights, you experiment with acceptance. Not acceptance of their behavior, as okay, but acceptance of the reality that this is how Pat operates right now. Something remarkable happens when you stop mentally wrestling with Pat's personality. You become more present to the actual meeting instead of the internal commentary about Pat's behavior. You might notice that Pat's interruptions often happen when they seem anxious about being overlooked. You might observe that your own tension decreases when you're not constantly braced for their next irritating move. You're not trying to fix Pat or manage their behavior. You're simply accepting what is. And paradoxically, this creates more space for authentic responses. Your relationship with your own habits shifts too. That afternoon energy crash that usually triggers a spiral of self-criticism about your diet, exercise routine, and general life management becomes simply information. I'm experiencing low energy right now. Instead of the familiar internal lecture about how you should have eaten better breakfast and gone to bed earlier, you might find yourself naturally reaching for a glass of water or taking a brief walk. The action comes from self-care rather than self-punishment. Even your phone habits, that compulsive scrolling that usually generates so much shame, can become a doorway to acceptance. When you catch yourself mindlessly swiping through social media, instead of the usual, "I'm so addicted, I have no willpower, I'm wasting my life," you might simply notice, "I'm seeking distraction right now." Sometimes this awareness alone is enough to break the trance. Sometimes you keep scrolling, but without the additional layer of self-attack, your family dinner table becomes another practice ground. When your mother launches into her familiar complaints about your sister's career choices, your usual internal response might be judgment of both your mother's nosiness and your sister's defensiveness. But tonight, you try acceptance. This is how my family processes anxiety about each other. You're not trying to fix the dynamic or educate anyone about healthy communication. You're simply allowing the scene to unfold without adding your own mental resistance to the mix. The magic isn't that your family suddenly becomes functional, or that Pat transforms into an ideal colleague, or that you never feel tired or distracted again. The magic is that you're no longer exhausting yourself, fighting reality. That energy you use to spend on internal arguments and character assassinations becomes available for actual living. You might find yourself responding more creatively to challenges because you're not stuck in reactive mode. Now comes the deeper test of Jung's wisdom. Those life moments that feel genuinely unacceptable. The job loss that blindsides you after years of loyal service. The diagnosis that changes everything. The relationship that ends despite your best efforts. The death of someone you love. These aren't minor inconveniences or personality quirks. These are the experiences that shake your fundamental sense of how life should work. Your first instinct is to fight the reality with everything you have. This shouldn't be happening. It's not fair. I don't deserve this. And the fighting feels necessary, even noble. How could you possibly accept something so devastating? Wouldn't acceptance mean you don't care? Wouldn't it mean you're giving up? But here's what you discover in those dark moments. Your condemnation of the situation doesn't change it. Your rage at the unfairness doesn't restore what was lost. Your desperate mental negotiations with reality, all those if-only scenarios, you replay, don't rewrite the past. Instead, your resistance to what has already happened adds a second layer of suffering on top of the original pain. You're not just dealing with the loss. You're dealing with your own internal war against the loss. When you lose that job, acceptance doesn't mean pretending you're grateful for the experience or that everything happens for a reason. It means acknowledging the reality. I am unemployed. Right now. Full stop. No editorializing about your worth as a person, no catastrophic projections about your future, no elaborate theories about office politics. Just the simple fact, held with as much gentleness as you can manage. From this place of acceptance, something unexpected becomes possible. Instead of spending your energy fighting what has already happened, you can direct that energy toward what you actually want to create. You might find yourself updating your resume with clarity, rather than desperation. You might discover networking conversations that feel authentic rather than transactional. You might even realize that this forced pause gives you space to consider career paths you never had time to explore while you were busy being employed. The same principle applies when you're facing health challenges. Your body has betrayed you, and your mind wants to prosecute it for the betrayal. I should have eaten better, exercised more, managed stress differently. But condemning your body for being sick doesn't heal it. Fighting your new limitations doesn't restore your old capacities. Acceptance of your current physical reality, not as permanent or desirable but as what is true right now, creates space for you to work skillfully with whatever healing is possible. Grief teaches this lesson most profoundly. When someone you love dies, every fiber of your being wants to reject the reality. The should-be-here thoughts, the bargaining with the universe, the anger at the unfairness. All of it is your psyche's attempt to undo the unundoable. But your beloved is still gone, and your condemnation of death doesn't bring them back. It only separates you from the love that remains, the memories that can still nourish you, the ways their influence continues to shape your life. Accepting loss doesn't mean you stop missing them, or that you're okay with their absence. It means you stop adding the extra layer of resistance that keeps you from fully feeling your love for them. When you're not fighting the reality of their death, you can be present to the reality of how much they meant to you. The grief becomes pure rather than complicated by your war against what has happened. This is Jung's most radical insight. Acceptance is not passive resignation, but the foundation for authentic action. When you're not wasting energy fighting what has already occurred, you can direct that energy toward what you actually want to create. When you're not imprisoned by your condemnation of reality, you become free to respond to reality with wisdom and creativity. You begin to understand that acceptance is actually the most practical approach to life. It allows you to see clearly what can and cannot be changed. It frees up the enormous amount of energy you've been spending on internal resistance. It puts you in right relationship with the present moment, which is the only place where real transformation can actually occur. As you practice this way of being, something profound shifts in your relationship to yourself and your life. you develop what Jung called the transcendent function, the ability to hold opposites without being torn apart by them. You can be disappointed without being devastated. You can be angry without being consumed. You can be afraid without being paralyzed. You learn to surf the waves of experience rather than being crushed by them. The path forward becomes clearer when you're not spending your energy fighting where you are. Problems that seemed impossible begin to reveal workable solutions. Relationships that felt hopelessly stuck start to shift. Dreams that were buried under layers of self-judgment begin to resurface. You discover that acceptance isn't the end of your story. It's the beginning of the story you actually want to write. So breathe into this moment, whatever it contains. Let your shoulders soften around what you've been carrying. Trust that your willingness to accept what is creates the space for what could be. Jung's wisdom isn't just psychological theory. It's a doorway to the life that's waiting on the other side of your resistance. Walk through it. Your freedom is there, in the simple act of saying yes to what already is. If this exploration of acceptance and transformation resonated with something within, if Jung's insight sparked a deeper reflection on the personal journey, consider hitting the like button below. It's a way to show that these meaningful conversations matter. For those ready to continue exploring wisdom that can shift the way one sees the self and the world, subscribing to the channel opens the door to ongoing insights. This space is for individuals who believe that understanding oneself is the first step toward true freedom. Every interaction helps support content that goes beyond surface-level motivation, reaching into the psychological depth that can transform life from the inside out.